Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about the Congress and BJP manifestos in Karnataka. We also talk about a disbanded unit of the Territorial Army. But first, we talk about sexual harassment in sports. Since January, top Indian wrestlers like Vinesh Phogat, Sakshi Malik and Bajrang Punia have been raising their voices against the president of the Wrestling Federation of India, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, who is also a BJP MP. Together, they have accused him of sexually harassing multiple women wrestlers and have been demanding that action should be taken against him.
अगर किसी भी खिलाड़ी को कुछ भी होगा रेसलिंग में तो प्रेसिडेंट देश जो हमारे रेसलिंग प्रेसिडेंट है वो जिम्मेदार रहेंगे हमारी फेडरेशन जिम्मेदार उस चीज की
India's lone Olympic medalist. Now, initially when the wrestlers started protesting at Jantar Mantar in Delhi, the government constituted a panel to look into the allegations. And that panel, which is headed by MC Mary Kom, had found that the Wrestling Federation of India doesn't have an internal complaints committee or ICC.
The ICC is something that, has been mandated into law since 2013. Every organization, not just a sports federation, every organization in the country is supposed to have an ICC, which is an internal complaints committee.
That's the Indian Express's Amit Kamath, and he explains that ICCs became mandatory after the government passed the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, or PoSH, in 2013. And they're very crucial to any organization.
Let's just assume that you are an employee of an organization who has to take a complaint up about sexual harassment or something inappropriate happens at the workplace against the most powerful person in the organization. So who do you go to? The ICC is essentially the first port of call for you. It's essentially a grievance redressal mechanism for any employee. In the case of athletes and sports federations, if anything happens in a federation, this is the first port of call for them, on paper at least.
And this is what the Wrestling Federation did not have, and which, like mentioned earlier, is in violation of the law. But turns out the Wrestling Federation was not alone. An Indian Express investigation by Amit Kamath and Mihir Vasavada found that across sporting federations in India, internal complaints committees are either absent or incomplete. To know more about the investigation, my colleague Anwiti Singh speaks to Amit about what the investigation revealed.
So, Amit, can you first tell us what led you to conduct this investigation?
So, when the Wrestling Federation issue had started, even then, the oversight committee which was looking into issues of the Federation had very clearly stated that the Federation does not have an ICC committee to begin with. Now, when that happened, we obviously knew that there will be other federations as well, which is why we started investigating all the federations that we can, which basically are affiliated to the Indian Olympic Association and get funding. Then we narrowed down the search to look at federations which, have sent athletes to the Asian Games, to the Commonwealth Games, or to the Olympics in the past, in the recent past at least. So we zeroed in on 30 federations. Out of these 30 federations, we noticed that wrestling apart, there are at least 15 federations which also have some issue or the other. In some cases, there are federations which don't have ICC altogether. We found at least 5 of these federations which did not have an ICC altogether, including wrestling, gymnastics, table tennis, handball, and volleyball.
Right. And besides this, you also found out there were 6 other federations that did not have an external member in the committee. Could you tell our listeners why that is a problem?
So having an external member is very important because for an athlete, sometimes what happens that these federations and these committees tend to come across as a very close circle, as a very incestuous circle. So if you are an athlete who wants to take up your complaint, you are not going to go to a federation office bearer who is very close to the person you want to complain against, which is why an external member being there, completely independent from the federation itself, is very important. There were 6 federations: archery, basketball, badminton, triathlon, yachting, kayaking and canoeing, which do not have an external member at all. There are other federations which have an external member, but them being there it's a little bit of a fluid situation. Let's just put it that way. So there was that. Then we found that there were at least 4 federations which have less than the mandated 4 members that are required. You look at squash, you look at kabaddi. Kabaddi, in fact, had just 2 members. And they told us that, whenever we need, we are going to add more members. So whenever a case comes to us, we will add more members, right? So there was squash, there was kabaddi, there was billiards and snookers and judo. These 4 federations had less than 4 members. One of the most interesting cases we found was the weightlifting federation, which has not 1 but 2 committees. Now, why interesting is because they have 1 committee which is a 3-member committee, the ICC. They have 1 committee which is a 4-member committee, which is the PoSH committee. 3 members here, 4 members here. The 3 members are common in both committees. There is another 4th one added. I don't know why. So we asked the office bearers, the treasurer of the federation, what happens in case you actually get a complaint? Which committee decides on these complaints? The office bearer was a little confused at the start what to do with the question. Then they told us that both the committees will hear the complaints. Now, we are a little confused as to why both committees will hear the complaints, because anyway, the 3 members are the same in both committees. So, which kind of, gave us the impression that a lot of these committees are in place only on paper. They are there because the law mandates it to be, but they are not there to have any sort of real lasting impact. That was our takeaway.
And Amit, in the cases where there is not an internal complaints committee in a federation, where do the sportsperson go with their complaints?
So during this time where we were, talking to so many federation officials, one of the federation officials told us in confidence that, obviously it's a very grave issue when there are allegations of sexual harassment and they should all be, investigated and all of that. And they said that they do have an ICC in place. Then they very pointedly told us that, we do have an ICC in place, but we know that they are not going to get any complaints. That person's history of, being there with the federation for how many ever decades, he said that there was never really a complaint which had come to them. So we asked them, why was that? So they said that, in cases of sexual harassment or sexual assault and something as serious as that, athletes usually prefer to go straight to the police rather than coming to the ICC bodies or the mechanism, which is a very damning indictment, if you look at it that way, of the ICC mechanism that has been put in place by the federations. The athletes themselves don't have a lot of trust in these ICC mechanisms, even if they do exist on paper, even if they do exist on the websites. Now, one of the other things, as you asked me about how will these athletes approach someone if in case there are cases, a lot of these federations, they've created an ICC committee, but if you go on their website, the numbers of these people on how to reach them is not there. Now, which means if your federation is based in Delhi, the ICC members are based wherever, all over India, and there is a case, let's say an athlete has a case in somewhere in Kerala, how do they reach these guys? If you don't have their phone numbers and their email IDs very prominently displayed, which is what the law also states, that in the workplace, you need to have these phone numbers very, very prominently displayed. So that was another stark issue that we noticed.
Okay, and Amit, now we are talking about this because of the ongoing protest by the Indian wrestlers. But before this, have we seen cases like these in other sports in the country?
Right. So we've also noticed that there have been certain cases where the government has been very quick to act on complaints. Like there was a case in cycling a couple of months back, in which case the investigation was fast tracked. Everything happened very quickly. There are other cases. Now, when you ask about past cases, this is the most shocking of them all. The Secretary General of Handball, Mr. Anandeshwar Pandey, he has a case of sexual assault by a player against him. So he is not in charge anymore, obviously. He was also the treasurer of the Indian Olympic Association for a while. So this man is now out of the Handball Federation. But the Handball Federation so far does not have an ICC, and we asked them why there was still no ICC in place. They told us that it's because of factionalism, because there are 2 factions in the federation itself. So they've been warring against each other, which is why it's come in the way of them forming an ICC. Now, that kind of tells you how seriously these federations even take something like the ICC and sexual harassment complaints. Your own office bearer has been booted out because there are complaints of such grave nature against him. And almost a year after that, you still don't have an ICC in place.
Right. And Amit, based on what you found out after the investigation and also based on the previous cases, What would you say are the major concerns this issue raises?
Look, right now there are a lot of people talking about, in fact, even PT Usha said this a while back, that wrestlers going on a dharna at Jantar Mantar is kind of tarnishes the image of India abroad. But the problem is we are looking at the victims and saying that them raising their concerns tarnishes the image of India abroad. In fact, sexual harassment happening to so many wrestlers. There are at least 7 wrestlers who now come out and given complaints against the Wrestling Federation of India chief. So that in itself is what actually tarnishes the image of the country rather than wrestlers actually raising the complaints. Another thing is, if these federations don't have mechanisms in place and mechanisms which the athletes trust in, one of the biggest things that needs to be done is for athletes to trust in the mechanisms that exist. If they don't, obviously you are going to get cases where they go to the police first, or they go to, protests like these at Jantar Mantar. That is what you will get eventually. And we did speak to a couple of lawyers who've been very active in ICC issues and sexual harassment issues, who said that, the law is very, very clear. There are no loopholes in the PoSH Act. They've not given you 19-20 ka this leeway that these guys have clearly taken, because there are places where federations have actually taken former athletes, put them into the ICC complaint. But are they truly independent? They are not. So when we tried to understand how a former athlete can be the head of the ICC federation, they said that, they are an external member. So we said, okay, fine. But then an external member can't be the head of the federation at the ICC committee. Then they said, okay, so because they are, part of the selection committee of the federation, they are an internal member. So that is what shows you that sometimes the federations have also tried to find loopholes when there are none, and tried to retrofit whatever they can and get away with it.
And next we talk about Karnataka, which is going to polls in the coming few days. Earlier this week, both the BJP and Congress unveiled their manifestos for the upcoming state elections. And what these two parties are promising has made a lot of headlines. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Akram M, who's covering the election for the paper, he began by telling us about the 6 pillars mentioned in the BJP's manifesto.
One is Anna, which is food security. Then there is Abhaya, which is like social security of sorts. Then there is Akshara, which is education. Arogya, health. Abhivriddhi, development. And Adaya, income. So these are the 6 broad sectors under which the BJP has formulated its manifesto.
Akram says that Prime Minister Narendra Modi praised the manifesto for taking a development-centric approach, and that it promises a whole range of things if the BJP is voted to power.
Some of the key ones are like they will create a plug and play environment for MSMEs so that they can have workspaces, business services and logistical support at a very nominal rent in every district. They have decided to institute a 5,000 crore, if voted to power, to institute a 5,000 crore fund for startups. Then they want to give production-linked incentives to generate about 10 lakh manufacturing jobs. Other key assurance is introducing metro rail connectivity, which is only in Bangalore, to cities, tier 2 cities such as Mysore, Hubli, Dharwad and Belgavi. Then they want to develop an EV city. There are proposals to incentivize 1,000 startups in EV sector. There are a lot of promises this way that the BJP has made in its manifesto when it comes to development.
But Akram says that what caught everyone's attention about the BJP's manifesto is the promise of implementing the Uniform Civil Code and conducting NRC in the state.
Till today, India doesn't have a national register of citizenship. So the announcement of Karnataka BJP to have national register of citizenship is a historic announcement again. And I would like to welcome this, and I feel that again this announcement will usher a nationwide call for a national NRC, which is being discussed.
NRC, or National Register of Citizens, is an exercise which is done to segregate citizens from non-citizens and has been used as a tool to identify illegal immigrants in Assam. And Akram says that while BJP has talked about UCC in Karnataka in the past, the promise of NRC surprised everyone.
I don't know how far this poll promise can be realized, especially in a state like Karnataka, which does not border any nation. For instance, NRC came in Assam because they wanted to remove the illegal immigrants here from Bangladesh. But in Karnataka, if you see, there is only a small portion of migrants who come from Bangladesh and work here. And even if they come, there is no accurate data to say how many of them are illegal immigrants. As far as realizing these assurances are concerned, which they have made in the manifesto, I think the party has a long way to go.
Akram says that the NRC is not a pressing issue for the voters in the state, and most people want something entirely different from their government.
Look at Bangalore, then the most pressing issue for them is infrastructure, or let's say unemployment and inflation. So these are some of the issues that are actually affecting people of Bangalore. So I don't know whether NRC will be a vote puller, or even UCC will be a vote puller from a large section of people per se.
Now, while the BJP has focused on UCC, NRC and development, Congress has taken a more welfare-centric approach, which is something that they have been trying to do in other states as well.
Some of the major guarantees that is announced is giving away 200 units of free electricity to all houses. Then this rupees 2,000 per month to every woman head of the family under a scheme called Griha Lakshmi. They also want to give unemployment allowance for 2 years. So rupees 3,000 will be given for youths who are graduates for a period of 2 years, and rupees 1,500 for diploma holders, again for a period of 2 years. Then they have also announced this free bus travel for women in public transport buses run by the State Transport Corporation in a scheme called Shakti. And they have also decided to hike the amount of grains from 5 kg to 10 kg given under Annabhagya scheme. So these are some of the prominent welfare schemes, and they have several other assurances too.
Now, both these parties also have some commonalities in their promises. For example, both parties have talked about reservation in their manifestos, but their approaches are very different.
So, if you start with BJP government hiked reservation and which breached that 50% ceiling. So, 50% ceiling was set by the Supreme Court for most states, say for Tamil Nadu, where you can't exceed 50% reservation. So, the promise of BJP government right now is to give constitutional validity to this reservation that exceeded above 50%. So, basically what BJP government has promised that it will make sure that these reservation that is hiked will be included in the 9th schedule of the constitution. So that is one. That is the part of BJP. Whereas Congress has said that it will increase the ceiling to 75% so that all communities which deserve reservation are given reservation.
And what's important to note is that back in March, the Basavaraj Bommai government decided to scrap the 4% reservation for the Muslims in the OBC category of the state. But the Congress has said that if they are voted to power, they'll bring it back. But even besides reservation, another issue that both parties have raised is that of tackling religious extremism.
In BJP's manifesto, it has said that it will start something called as K-SWIFT, which is an organization to prevent fundamentalism and terrorism in the state, which will tackle basically that. And it has also promised to make sure that all posts are filled so that as any acts that threaten the security of the state are foiled at the earliest. When it comes to Congress, it has also promised to make sure that there are no vacancies in the police force. And also it has said that it would take decisive action against any groups or individuals that are involved in harboring animosity between communities. So in that part of the assurance, it says organizations may it be from the minority community or majority community. So for minority community, it cites PFI as an example, and for majority community, it cites Bajrang Dal as an example.
And this promise by the Congress of taking decisive action against the Bajrang Dal has angered the BJP. In fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi criticized this during one of his rallies, saying that they want to lock up Bajrang Bali, which is another word for the Hindu god Hanuman. Now, Akram says that while there are major differences in how both the parties approach the same issues, there was one point on which they both agreed, and that's to announce Bengaluru as the state capital region.
Which both parties, I think, have announced that they will declare it as a state capital region so that the development of Bangalore becomes easier and all civic agencies can be clubbed together.
And what also stands out to Akram is how both the manifestos have tried to address inflation and unemployment in the state.
When it comes to the Congress manifesto, I think their 5 guarantees are the most unique aspects of their manifesto, which tries to address issues such as unemployment and inflation. But when it comes to the BJP manifesto, I think it also tries to do the same thing by making sure that welfare is reaching the people. And one of the main assurances it has made is to provide 3 free cooking gas cylinders every month, which I think is again measured to address inflation, and it feels that people are being affected by inflation. And along the lines of the Indira canteens that Congress had set up, BJP has also assured that it will set up Atal Ahara Kendras in every ward of every municipal corporation in the state to provide affordable, quality and healthy food across the state. And there are several schemes like this, which are sort of new when it comes to the manifestos of both the parties are concerned.
And in the end, we talk about a regiment of the Territorial Army that was recently disbanded. Last year, the Ministry of Railways had decided to disband 5 Railway Engineers Territorial Army regiments across the country. All these regiments in question were funded by the Indian Railways. And just last month, one of the regiments in Chandigarh was finally disbanded. But the personnel of this unit moved to the Punjab and Haryana High Court to stop themselves from getting discharged, even though the regiment, of course, had been disbanded. To know more about the issue and the significance of the Territorial Army in India, we speak to the Indian Express's Aman Singh Chhina in the segment. So, Aman, to start with, can you tell us the difference between the Territorial Army and the Indian Army?
So Territorial Army is like the Indian Army. The regular army is an all-volunteer army. But the difference is that those who serve in the Territorial Army do not serve for the entire year. They only do a few weeks of training in the Territorial Army, and during which time they are said to be embodied in Territorial Army. And at that point of time, they enjoy all the privileges of an army officer or an army jawan, as the case may be. So the primary difference is that whereas in the regular army, an officer or a jawan serves throughout the year for a definite period of time, for 15 years, 17 years, or, when his age of retirement comes. In the Territorial Army, you serve till a certain age, but only for a few months a year. Or when you are called up for active duty, where you would be required to serve for maybe the entire year or maybe for a few months, but that happens very infrequently. So the primary qualification to become a Territorial Army officer or a Jawan is that you have to be gainfully employed elsewhere. You should have a regular job somewhere else. You might be a lawyer, you might be a doctor, you might be an engineer, you might be a journalist. You could be doing anything in any profession, but you should be gainfully employed, and you can enroll up to the age of 42 years.
Right. And can you tell us the function and significance of the Territorial Army, and especially the regiment in Chandigarh which just got disbanded?
Well, this regiment was part of 6 other regiments which form a part of the Territorial Army Railway Engineer Regiments. Now, these are special regiments which are part of the Territorial Army, and these are called departmental regiments in the Territorial Army. And in the Territorial Army, there are many departmental units of various professions. There are regiments which are of Army Service Corps, and the people who work in those regiments are from the Indian Oil. So if there is an emergency in the country and the oil supply is disrupted, so these are the people from the Indian Oil who are working part-time as Territorial Army soldiers. They will step in and ensure a regular supply of oil or petroleum or lubricants to the country in emergency. Similarly, the Railway Engineer Regiment personnel, their task is that if there is a national emergency, whether internal or external, or a railway strike, where the railway services are affected, and for the defense and security of the country, the railway services have to continue, then these people will step in. These are trained railway officers and personnel, including drivers, guards, mechanics, all sorts of trades, and they will ensure that the railways keep functioning. So this is the primary task of a railway engineer regiment.
Right. And can you tell us why these regiments were disbanded by the railway?
So now a call was taken by the railways to disband these regiments because all these regiments were funded by the railways. So these are called departmental units. So for example, as I talked about the Indian Oil personnel being part of Army Service Corps battalions, those units are and those battalions are funded by the Indian Oil. Here in this case, the railways funds these regiments, and railways decided that it was no longer economical or necessary to have these many regiments, and they have disbanded all, leaving aside only one right now. So the Chandigarh regiment is part of those regiments which have been disbanded, and the railways feels that there is no need the present day and age to maintain these regiments.
Okay, and how did the officers and Jawans in this regiment respond?
So now the officers and Jawans of this regiment, the core officers and Jawans who are from the railways, they number about little more than 70. They have gone to the Punjab and Haryana High Court and obtained a stay on their discharge from the Territorial Army upon the disbanding of the regiment. The regiment itself has been disbanded, but these people, they are still in the Territorial Army. They have not been discharged, as was envisaged by the railways and the Territorial Army headquarters, because they have obtained a stay order. So these people have contended before the Punjab and Haryana High Court that our services are critical to the defense of the nation in an emergency, and therefore we are entrusted with maintaining a railway link between Punjab and certain areas in Jammu and Kashmir, and this is a very important task, and that regiments like ours should not be disbanded. So this case is currently sub judice in the Punjab and Haryana High Court.
Right. And Manaman, in this case, what happens to the campus of the regiment, where all the offices and residences are?
So what has happened now is that this regiment is located on a very prime piece of land. It is around 74 acres of land, including a substantial part of which is a jungle with a lot of flora and fauna. So this is in a very prime location in Chandigarh on the Chandigarh-Panchkula highway, which connects the two cities, and therefore it is much valued. As of now, the entire place is empty because the regiment has been disbanded and there is nobody there to take care of it. But though it is learnt that the Railway Protection Force would shortly be moving in to protect that area from encroachment. So what the railways officials have told us is that they intend to commercialize and monetize this land, which means they would, give it on lease, and, there might be commercial activities over there. A mall may come up or housing units may come up. It is not known as of now, because the Railway Land Development Authority, the RLDA, will take possession of this land, and they have plans to monetize and commercialize this piece of property.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by me, Rahel Philipose, Anwiti Singh, Shashank Bhargava, and Utsa Sarmin, who spoke to Akram for the Karnataka segment. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.